in 1783, they realized that they would have to improve their blueprint or their plan if they wanted to build an entire country, right? So you have this really messy plan, and it's not very good for a plan for an entire country. Because under the Articles of Confederation, each of the 13 original states was its own state with its own system of government, its own money, and its own rules. There was no comprehensive system of federal laws. So if you think about that for a minute, it might sound okay, but think its own system of government, its own money, and its own rules. That means, if you will imagine this, that, so what state are you in?
New York.
New York.
New York.
Okay, great. One of the 13 original colonies. So if you were to travel, let's say to Pennsylvania, then you would then have different laws. You would have different money. So raise your hand if you traveled internationally before, like to a different country. Okay, I see some raised hands. And so you might have faced something where you have to convert your money into another currency, right? So imagine that you had to do that if you were just going to New Jersey or going to Pennsylvania, then that would be really, really bothersome, right? So this is why the Articles of Confederation was not the neatest plan. So the colonists came together, and on May 25th, 1787, colonists held a convention in Philadelphia. Their goal was to revise the Articles of Confederation, and a convention is a gathering of people who have a common interest, so they want to do the same thing. I go to a lot of conventions, actually, and in the conventions we're usually talking about how to improve education and make better presentations and stuff like that, but in this convention it was to revise the Articles of Confederation, so that was their goal. But they ended up creating a whole new document, which they called the Constitution. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Constitution before. A lot of hands have shot up. Yep, I think probably everybody has. So the Constitution was a clearer game plan. It's a blueprint that outlines the structure of our government. Can anyone tell me what documents or ideas influenced the founders when they were writing the Constitution? Well, the Articles of Confederation would be one, right? Since they were trying to revise the Articles of Confederation and make it better, they ended up creating a new document. So the Articles of Confederation. Also, have any of you heard of a document called the Magna Carta? Well, the Magna Carta was this English document from a long time ago. And at the time, there was a king called King John. And what the nobles were mad at was that King John had a lot of power. If he had wanted, he could have just taken one of them and thrown them in a dungeon. So they made him sign something called the Magna Carta, which was kind of like our Constitution in that it limited his power. So our Constitution talked about how to balance power in the government and laws. So as an architect creates a blueprint, he or she thinks about what the building is for. So whether it's a hospital or a school or a house, and what forces such as weather or weight might act against it, right? So if you were building a house in the middle of Wisconsin in an area that's really prone to tornadoes, then you would probably want to build a good deep basement for people to go to. Or if you were building it in Florida where hurricanes or tropical storms might come by, then you might want to build it pretty strong against winds. And it was similar with the Constitution. The Constitution is the blueprint for our government. The main body of the Constitution outlines the three branches of government. So what are the three branches of government?
Executive, judicial, and legislative.
Very good. Executive, judicial, and legislative. So now the judicial is the Supreme Court and courts, and the executive is the president and his cabinet, and the legislative is the House and the Senate. So these three branches of government, maybe what the colonists were worried about was that one branch of government would end up being super powerful. Maybe the executive branch would be super powerful, and the president would decide everything. Or the legislative branch would be super powerful, and the legislature would decide everything. Or the judicial. So in order to keep each of the three powers in check and working with each other, then they create something called checks and balances. And that defined how much power each branch of government can have. They also decided how people would elect their representatives, so that decided how we vote. And so this Constitution, which was created so many hundreds of years ago, was really very, very influential in how we live today. So what might an architect consider as he or she creates a blueprint? What's your view? Well, the thing about the Founding Fathers were the architects of this blueprint, the Constitution. If you think of our government as a big house that these Founding Fathers were trying to build, then the Constitution would be their blueprint, their plan for it. What did they consider when they were creating the Constitution? Well, if we take a look, if you remember when you're creating a blueprint, then you think about maybe what kinds of weather would act against it. In the Constitution, the Founding Fathers thought about what kinds of branches of government might try to take control. And so they tried to help the different branches get along and keep each one's power in check. So this is what the Constitution did. It also gave us rules, in the Bill of Rights, for instance. And so the Constitution is the blueprint for the house that is U.S. government. The Constitution has allowed us to become a world superpower, and the freedoms it guarantees have encouraged us to become one of the most creative, diverse, and forward-thinking societies in the world. So, would anybody like to tell me something they've learned about the Constitution, Declaration of Independence?
That